Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, creator of Wild Soul Movement and your host for the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. I am so excited to be continuing on with Man Month, or Manvember, as I'm affectionately referring to it. And it's just been such a fun opportunity to give different perspective, right? Like, we talk to women all the time. We're really getting to know, love, and trust ourselves. So where do dudes fit in? How can we take their insights, learn from their wisdom, and just feel what it's like to be men living in this world? One of the things, Andy, I'm going to introduce you in a second, but Andy, one of the things we say is that this podcast is about reclaiming and redefining womanhood in the 21st century. So a lot of the men, much like yourself, who I've invited, are really reclaiming and redefining manhood in the 21st century. So for everyone watching, you can see my handsome friend, Andy Drish. For anyone listening, this is Andy Drish. He is actually great friends with my partner, Mike, who many of you are familiar with, have heard me have various conversations with Mike on the podcast or on the YouTube channel. And Andy, this is really cool how we got connected. I typically don't do these traditional, bio introductions. Andy, I was looking to actually have more male energy in my life, not just a couple months into me and Mike living together. I was like, I need other powerful men in my life. And I would love to do some, how can I connect with that? Mike introduced me to Andy, and we shared this amazing experience of, we had this shared journal. So 2 or 3 times a week, we would just type it to a Google Doc, like what was going on. And up until that point, you were just a name that like several people had said.
We had never met.
And people had been telling me for years that I would love you. And then there we were, just spilling our guts for 30 days.
It was so beautiful. We had never met, and we were just going into like the deepest triggers from our relationship and sharing them and getting perspectives from both angles. It was, I really love that. I forgot all about that. That was amazing.
So beautiful. And that was one of the reasons why, when I was like, all right, I can interview 8 guys this month, who do I want to talk to? You were at the top of my list. So there's one question I ask everyone, but before I do that, how would you describe, who you are in the world right now?
Oh my God, it's all in flux. I'm in like the heart of Saturn returns. I just finished 8 months in Bali off the grid with no work. So no email, no phone, no internet. Well, I mean internet, but no Facebook. And I was working with a dude who spent the last 40 years studying Tantra. We were doing 2 to 3 hours of breath work and body work every day. And after that, I don't really know. I'm an entrepreneur. I built a business. It's grown really, really quickly. We've got a team of 10 people. We've helped educate people all over the world. I don't know what's next, and I'm not really in a rush to find that out. I'm actually more excited by just living the questions than having answers right now. So
so good.
That's where I'm at.
Living the questions, but not having answers.
Yeah, because I think if I had the answers of like, what should I be doing? Where should I put focus and energy and purpose and all that? If I actually had the questions, I don't think I'm ready for them yet.
Yeah.
And so just like the experimenting and the unknown and the trying and testing and going down different paths and screwing stuff up, and that's it's really attractive to me right now. And I like it.
I like that a lot. We're going to come back to that because there's another question that I need to ask you before we can get back into that. What do you love about being a man?
Everything. What do I love about being a man? I think men have the ability to make stuff possible in a way, not that women don't, it just comes natural to us. One of the things Libby, who's my partner, we refer to is that men make it possible and women make it worthwhile.
Ooh.
And so when I think of, for example, we're going to go camping this weekend with 6 to 8 friends. And it's like our little tribe of people we just really, really love. And us guys are probably going to take care of most of the getting it all there and getting camp set up and making sure food's all handled and stuff. and the women tend to bring the decorations, and they get the vibe and the comfy pillows and blankets and just like all the stuff that has to do with the senses. And so if it was just us guys camping, it'd be a bunch of like ogres around a fire, and then if it's just women, it's like they wouldn't have the structures as much. It would just be like and I think when you bring the two together, it makes a really, really beautiful balance. So I think that's one of the things I love about being a man is my ability to create and make things possible for me and friends.
And that is just, I don't know if that's going to resonate for every woman the way it's resonating for me right now, but to me that feels like one of the reasons I love men. Like that's one of the things I love about men. I've been thinking about that a lot lately is all the reasons I just love men. And what's funny is the impetus to calling in all these very powerful, inspiring men into my life was earlier this year when I set that intention and we started journaling. And then all of a sudden, all these incredible men popped up. And I'm like, like my coach that I'm working with, all these other people. So let's go back to when you said, I'm not in any rush to have the answers and living the questions. Something in me got both so like turned on and excited by that and a little bit terrified. Because like the uncertainty of it, how do you exist in that uncertainty as someone who I know previously was working quite a bit without getting pulled back into that, like the conditioning of like, you must be doing, achieving, creating?
Yeah. It's not easy. It's like a daily thing that's happening for me. To give everyone a little bit of the backstory. So we started journaling last November, right?
Oh, wow.
Like November, isn't that right? It was
Maybe,
less than a year ago.
probably, yeah.
It's crazy to me. And that was one of the most turbulent times of my life. Like I was in a really, really intense problems with my business partner. We were butting heads a lot. There were a lot of transitions in the company. I was on the road for 30 days between a handful of cities and countries, and I came home, and when I got home, I got sick. And I drove myself to urgent care on like day 3 of being sick. And when I got there, they were checking my lungs for fluid in them, and they had me like breathe in. And as I breathed in, I passed out, and I started vomiting like from this total pass out. This has never happened to me in my life. And so they like put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me into a room, stuck an IV in my arm, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, what is going on? And I had no idea what that would actually translate into. And that translated into this year was a year for me of like taking a huge step back. And I realized that I couldn't create any more in the world with the current set of beliefs and programming and just like identity that I had. And I needed to really take some time off, which is why I went to Bali. So fast forward to now and sitting in the uncertainty of it. I don't know the answer, but every time that I try and push too hard, or I'm pushing in a way that's out of alignment. You know what it's like when you're pushing in alignment versus when you're pushing out of it, where it feels forced. It's not like a good pushing. It's like you're actually trying to force stuff. Every time I do that, I just get more signs that I need to just slow down and take a step back and relax a little bit. And so it's really challenging for me to sit in the uncertainty of it.
I love that. And what I love about that is you're just like you said, sitting in it. So you're not running away from it, not trying to distract yourself from it, not having any bombs. You're like, I'm just in it, which is great because I think, you use the word conditioning, and we talk a lot about, the cultural programming we have. And a lot of this podcast is about unwinding that and unraveling it and going, okay, what happens when I strip all of that away? And it sounds like that's kind of where you are right now. So if you feel like sharing, what are some of the beliefs, programming, or pieces of identity that have been stripped away as you've been taking this 8 months so far?
Yeah, a big one, I think probably the biggest, is this identity piece around being an entrepreneur, or like really tying my identity to the work that I've been in. So for us guys, we tend to define ourselves, by what we're creating in the world. I think so anyway. Like it's easy to get wrapped up in that. Just like women tend to get stereotyped for beauty, like physical presence, and men tend to get stereotyped for success at some level and what they've been able to create. And I found myself really wrapped up in that. And our business has grown really quickly over the past 3 years. We went from nothing to having a team of 10 or 11 full-time people. And the entire reason I got into business in the first place was to create life on my terms, create it exactly how I want to, in terms of having it with, going the places that I want to go and having the experiences I want to have and creating the relationships that I want to create. And business was in service of all of that. And what I realized over the past year is that I had lost sight of that, and that business had, almost like a virus, it had infiltrated everything. And it was just, my days were driven by like business was the biggest thing in my life, not the other way around. It's not like life and business is one thing in it. It was business was just everything. And so really deconstructing and letting go of the whole construct of being an entrepreneur and having an identity that's tied to helping other entrepreneurs and doing all of that has been interesting and challenging to let go of. And in it, I find myself feeling more free to create what I want to create, not because of lack, not because of insecurity, not because I have to prove something, but creating for the sake of creating, because it is aligned with essence. It's aligned with who I am and the world that I want to see. And so I'm experiencing more freedom in that so far.
I would love to ask you, since you just said essence, the world you want to see, how do you, I know you said you spent a lot of time off of Facebook, but there's other ways. So how do you, I think some people experience, men and women, guilt around having this privilege or access to things that a lot of people don't in the world. And there's, of course, there's always crappy things going on in other places. How do you reconcile taking the time to do, because I get women who ask me this in Wild Soul Movement, like, who am I to put this time and effort and energy into myself when there's people who don't even have clean water in other areas of the world? What's your, I know my views on that. What's yours?
You know your views on this?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I want to know what yours are after this.
Okay.
Yeah, my views on it is it's like I've just never been able to give from a place of lack. Like you have to help self first. It's the whole idea of put the air mask on on yourself before you put it on the child as the plane's going down. That's simply it. I remember it was really interesting when I told a bunch of people I was going off to Bali. I emailed a bunch of people in my life, just kind of looking for advice and ideas and stuff. And I remember one just really stuck out. And he was like, I don't know what you're complaining about so much. It seems like you've got all of this good stuff. I would just stop complaining and do more stuff in the world. And I was like, I appreciate the honesty, but it's not it for me. And I mean, the fact is, the more there's masculine and feminine energy, right? And the more masculine energy that I want to have, the more creative life force that I want to have in the world, the extent to which I can hold that and drive with that, I believe it needs to be matched with an equivalent amount of feminine. So if I'm going to be really, really on for a period of time, I need to be really off for a period of time, and that needs to be in balance. And what happened for me is that where they were totally out of balance, whereas 90% on masculine, drive, go, 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 and 10% actually relaxing, and it's unsustainable. You can't do it. It's the cycles of nature, right? I always like going back to nature for everything, and how everything in nature goes in these infinity loops of cycles, and life is the exact same. And if you're out of balance, nature is going to course correct you. Yes. And it probably is not going to be a pleasant course correction.
No. I love that. Something I've been saying for a while that I think I originally got from my friend Susanna, who's been on the podcast, was exactly that. As you're progressing, evolving, whatever in life, things need to happen, and it's either you can take care of it or life's going to take care of it for you. Mm-hmm. So you just said something, if you're out of balance, I'll go back and listen to it and get that quote because it was really great. So yeah, are those in alignment with your thoughts? Pretty much, because I want to add in a belief that if you really, a lot of people talk about oneness, but I don't know if people actually believe it. But I really do believe that there is this fabric, all of existence is this fabric, right? And in each one of us as individuals, we're like a thread in the fabric. And so if that's the case, then my own healing really does benefit all beings. In some way, shape, or form, anything I do to be a better, more loving, caring human and have a better human experience, that can in fact touch other people's and have any kind of triple effect, is for the benefit of all beings, is helping the entire fabric. And whereas the other thing is I don't believe in putting energy towards what I don't want. And so while I really admire and respect people who are activists, who are like fighting for things, I'm not a person who is into fight energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm railing against something with this negative force behind it. I don't know that that's helping. Like the fight against cancer. All right, how long's that been going on for? Where's the cure? You know? So it just begs a lot of those like fight methodologies beg the question, how's that working out for you? And so I would rather be on the side that is so staunchly standing for putting energy towards creating what I want and not even like worrying about what I don't want and just trusting that that's going to take care of itself. And at the same time, I love that there are people who are doing that because I don't have to.
Mm-hmm. So well, you can see where we want to go next, but something that I feel especially alive with in conversing with you is the topic of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned at the beginning, like the feminine evolving in a way and the masculine evolving in a way. And I actually think what we're also seeing is relationship seems to be evolving right now in a way that is uber fascinating to me. And Mike and I just chatted like 3 weeks ago and had like a nice little catch up and stuff. And I always kind of get like a little window into what you guys are working with and playing with. And so that is a topic that I think would be fun for us to explore a little.
Yeah. Oh, this is so fun. It's like so fun to have like that man energy on the other side here. Yes. And actually, for those of you listening, if you have not listened, I actually did a 3-part series on the podcast called How to Be More Feminine. And it was even just that question, which is silly because as a woman who traditionally I have a lot of yang, I have a lot of that masculine energy. I have always been like a get shit done type of person. I spent a lot of my life feeling quite guilty that I was like too masculine, only to then realize that like feminine expresses in so many different ways. So the topic of masculine and feminine and relationship is a super popular one on the podcast. And in fact, every time we post something about relationships, it gets probably 3 times as many downloads as everything else. So I know no one listening is going to be upset that we're going to go here. So you brought it up. So I'm going to let you, where would you like to start?
Great. This is like, it's such a hot topic. And I think it's such a hot topic because nobody has an answer yet.
Right.
Like there's no model that we've seen there's no model that I've seen that is actually working in a way that is what I want, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Like there isn't,
I'm like giddy over here.
Are you?
Uh-huh.
I love this topic. And to give you guys a little background, I've been in love with a woman for 4 years. We met relatively young, and we broke up for about 8 or 9 months in between. And we just went through this whole phase in Bali, which was super, super turbulent. We're on the other side of it now. And relationship has been one of the greatest things for me in terms of waking up. And in terms of understanding self, understanding the world, it has been a catalyst in my life of becoming a better man, of creating greater things in the world. And I owe so much of it to Libby, the girl that I've been in love with for the past 4 years. And this whole, I don't really know where to go with this, Liz. So okay. I'm just kind of rambling.
I can guide you then. So what you said, and I think what a lot of people will resonate with, is we don't see a lot of models that work. So I think if we had to do like a state of relationship address and kind of take a look at our culture as a whole and where the big struggles are, you know, divorce rates are super high. Infidelity is probably off the charts. I don't think there are like surveys for that available and research studies.
I think they're pretty high.
But, and I think one of the reasons why is there's just fundamental differences between men and women in relationships that people have deemed right or wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'll throw some out there that like women are highly emotional or too emotional, or that it's wrong for men to desire other women. And I think there's some biology at play. Like it's just, you know, Mike and I have had conversations, I imagine you guys probably have too, around him feeling guilt or shame that he desires other women. And my answer always is, I would be concerned if you didn't. So It's not that you have the desire, it's that what do you do with the desire? What does that mean for us? And then there's a place of, well, if I really love you, would I not want you to have everything you want? And kind of playing in that space. So if you only grew up with imprints of like traditional relationship models, like get married, have kids, commit yourself to one person for the rest of your life, everything I just said is probably terrifying for you because you've been taught that all of that is wrong. But what if none of it's wrong? And I think this is the space that you and I play in our relationships. What if it's not wrong? What if it's the truth? And we've just been denying ourselves the truth for centuries, which is what actually brings up all conflict in relationships. How's that for a place to start?
This is a great place to start. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, they're like talking about open relationships or blah, 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 and you're like, this is like too far out there. I grew up in a town of 600 people in Iowa. I'm like the complete boy next door, like in terms of upbringing. I barely traveled outside the Midwest when I was 18. Like I went to college in Des Moines, Iowa, and I thought it was like New York. Like I wouldn't have known the difference because it was just a city, and cities were scary. So that being a little caveat, man, this is such a fun topic. One of the things Libby and I come back to is this idea of functionality over form. And what I mean by that is every like few months, we come together, and it generally happens in like 3-month cycles is kind of what I've found. And this is how we kind of run our business too. But in 3-month cycles, we'll sit down and we'll have a little retreat where we'll go somewhere or we'll get out of our normal space and we'll sit down and we'll have these sentence stems and we'll be like, all right, what is it that you want right now? What is in the way? What are you frustrated with? What would you like to experience over the next few weeks or next 3 months? And then the question that tends to really get us most of the time is, what is it that you want that you're afraid to share?
Oh yeah.
And then from that place, what we do is we kind of get everything out on the table of like in her phase at this point in life, what she's wanting, and in my phase, what I'm wanting. And then from there, we create a box around everything that we really want, like the things that are most alive. And then we have a focus for the next 30 days or the next 3 months around exactly what that is. And I found this to be an interesting way to constantly allow the relationship to ebb and flow and to like be with what is in the moment and not get stuck into these old paradigms or like these old, this is what relationship is and here's the box that you have to fit in.
That's exactly, I love that so much. So something Mike and I did on our 1-year anniversary back in April was we actually did a forgiveness practice. It's called Ho'oponopono. I love this. To just basically clear anything that had happened over the course of the last year. You know, there's always, I think one of the reasons we even get in relationship, we even choose our partner, contrary to what popular belief is, that relationships supposed to be easy, find your soulmate. I really think they're just an engine for growth. Yeah. And so you are always going to select a person who's absolutely going to trigger all the stuff that you need to deal with at the time, right? And so it's almost like having this human version of all of your issues embodied and standing right across from you to be like, oh my God, okay. So I say that especially for people who are in a relationship where they feel like it should be easier or whatever. Everything is an ebb and flow, right? So sometimes there's phases that are so like light and lovely and easy and so like loving and passionate. And sometimes there aren't. Like we called this phase of us moving in was like 6 months. I called it the cauldron phase because that's what it was like. It was literally like we stepped into a cauldron and we just threw all of our shit into it and we were like, let's do this. And that had just started when you and I were doing the journal. So, it was very intense. And there were times when I wanted to run. And what was cool is even just noticing those patterns and instead of running, staying. And it wasn't settling. It was very consciously choosing to stay because I knew that I could either work this stuff out now, or I could just pack it up, take it with me to the next one, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. So something Mike and I did, we did the Ho'oponopono. So we cleared out, just like a lot of every relationship is going to have like hurts that are still lingering a little bit or a lot of it, resentment, stuff like that. So we did a little forgiveness practice. We cleared it. And for those of you listening, I'll put a link. I have a YouTube video for how to do that practice. Nice. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. We cleared that out. And then what we did was we made a list. Mike actually he pulled out a blank sheet of paper and all these markers and put them out on the table. And we wrote down, all right, how do we want our relationship to feel, or what do we want to experience? So we just started writing words, and we had these words. And then after we did that, we put the words on the altar. We have an altar in our bedroom. And then a couple months later, we revisited just to be like, how are we doing? And what we each did was actually on each word, like on a scale of 1 to 5, we ranked how well we felt we were doing. And the cool thing was our rankings were almost identical.
Wow.
And then we saw, all right, we want a little more of this. Oh, we want a little more of this. We're killing it in that, high five, you know? So it was like this mix of celebrating and also going, all right, there's some stuff that we can cultivate here. And then we get to choose how we do that.
Yes.
And so it's playful and it's productive and it's like experiential versus, and it's, I think something you and I probably both have in common, lots of communication. Almost sometimes it feels like, seriously, do we just need to have another conversation right now? But the fact that we do is why it's so incredible, and we do get so much out of it. And it's, in fact, I've grown more being in this relationship with Mike than being in having any kind of coach or doing any kind of program or anything that I've ever invested in.
Oh yeah. It's like having, for me, I look at, the feminine is so different. And I'm constantly surprised. And what I notice is that the feminine is almost always responding to how I'm showing up. And so I can actually, I've learned this tip from Brian Franklin, I can actually use Libby's body as a compass for me to see how embodied and how present am I right now in this moment. And I find it so fascinating, like hearing what it is that how you and Mike are handling these things, and then hearing this idea of, like, as I'm starting to see the differences more and more between men and women, it's really making me think the whole idea of 50-50 partnerships are completely backwards. And the whole notion of even having, like, both people focused on having a career seems really challenging. I guess, actually, that's not what it is. What it is that for me, I want a relationship where we are both living in our essence. We're both living in the space where we're giving and contributing the most to the world. And for me, I find that as being, I actually want a relationship where my partner doesn't have to worry about the money piece. Because if she doesn't have to worry about that, it's like such a weight off of her shoulders where she can relax into the feminine and be so much more. And that's where I find that her real gifts is just in the total, it's in the senses for Libby. Like, her intuition is super dialed. She can walk into a room and immediately know 10 things of what would make the room more connected and more dropped in. It's like having date night and her getting all of, like, the little herbs for food if we're cooking dinner, and getting the flowers and getting the right wines, and just, like, she has an uncanny ability for that. And then it really makes me rethink this whole idea of, like, 50-50 partnerships of, like, the man does half and the women does half, and it just doesn't work for me. That I've found yet.
And what's cool, again, because we're communicating about these things with our partners, it could be expressed, it could be acknowledged, and it could be worked through. Because I think what's really damaging in a lot of relationships, and I have this, like, I've had so many coaching calls with women who are sharing things with me, and I'll ask, so what did your husband say when you told him that? Silence, right? They haven't. So there's all these uncommunicated desires and expectations that are killing people. And it's just not fair. Like, how is anyone on either side, the man or the woman, or, you know, if anyone's listening and it's not man and man, woman and woman, it doesn't make a difference. Any human, if you're not communicating with them what you want, which also requires you connecting to yourself enough to even know what you want, and then communicating it, and not especially being attached to whether or not they're going to say yes, because just because you've asked for something doesn't mean there's an obligation to get it. You certainly can't expect that someone's just going to read your mind or just know. And then to be upset when you don't get it is, like, crazy, but a lot of people do that.
And then it's like, it's like you didn't read my mind, and then you're harboring resent because they didn't read your mind and do the thing, and then there's a thing in the space, and the guy, we're oblivious, we have no freaking clue why you're pissed
Right.
off,
Yeah.
but you just are. So so I'm curious about this. Why don't women share their desires with us? Like,
So-
when these things come up, why aren't they sharing it?
Two-part, I believe, and this is just straight based on the women who I've worked, hundreds, thousands of women who I've worked with over the years, is, again, programming. Women, I think, are really cultured to be nurturers and to be givers. Even though it's innately feminine to receive, we're so not connected to that, like, in life until maybe you listen to something like this, right? Or maybe you do work with somebody, you go, oh, like, I give all the time. It's always output, not input. And so I think the idea of even asking for what we want sounds like too much, or feels like too much, or it's scary. Of course, there's a fear of rejection. And depending on what it is, we've also, one of the purposes of Wild Soul Movement, reclaiming, redefining womanhood for the 21st century, is we've been cultured long enough now, women, I think, to basically just operate in the world as lovelier versions of men. So,
Which is tragic.
Right. It's like a waste. It's like a waste of
Yeah,
so
totally.
much like nature and like innate amazingness. So so I have a lot of work to do in the world, but I really think that has a lot to do with it, is that we don't think we deserve it. It feels inappropriate. And I can speak for myself and a lot of women. It's that belief I could do it myself. I shouldn't need anyone. And this is something I've worked through with Mike. In fact, I don't mind sharing. He got home from Burning Man. At the time we're recording this interview, he got home from Burning Man last night. And my own ability to receive and not do everything myself has been something that's huge work for me. And just the idea that it's safe for me to need him sometimes. And even the word need, because honestly, there just is some medicine that he could provide for me better than I can provide for myself.
This is a fascinating topic to me, because Libby's struggled with this too at times, of being connected to that inner voice.
Yeah.
And one experiment we ran 2 years ago, it was right after we broke up, and we were getting back together, and we took a trip to Costa Rica. And for the first 3 days of the trip, we were staying with a friend in this entrepreneur home. So it was a massive mansion with 8 bedrooms, and they had Voxers. So you literally would just send a message, and they would bring you green juice to your room.
God.
Like just having everything taken care of. And I had to work for a couple of days. And so we were there for 3 days where there was nothing in the way, and she kept feeling stressed. Everything was completely taken away that would cause stress, but she kept feeling stressed. And so then we ran an experiment for a week where we only did what Libby wanted to do, what was in her flow. And it was one of the most magical weeks that we had. And I was just like, whatever you want. And we did that for a week. And ever since then, it's been really important to me that she's following that and connected to it, because not only does it make her world better, but it actually makes our relationship better. And so if you're listening to this and you're not actually connected to that, your relationship is suffering because you're not. And so, and I think the more that you start voicing it, the more that your partner will respond, because we're men. I feel like we're programmed to serve women at some level. Our deepest desire is just to make you happy. That's how I feel. It's and so anytime Libby does something where she can make it a game for me to win, where she can make it a way that I can serve her or make things better, I generally go for it,
Yeah.
But the more that you can share your desires from an unattached place and make it a way for us as men to give those to you, I think you will be blown away by the response that you get when you share like that.
Yes. So I don't know if you've ever listened to or read any of Allison Armstrong's stuff. And
she's great.
One of the amazing things that I took from her work, and again, we'll put a link to it. Actually, it was The Amazing Development of Men. Life changing for me to see how the readiness of men and women at different phases of life, so different.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful to know that it's not about us. It doesn't mean that you love us any less, you don't desire us, or all these things, but there are just things that you need to satisfy, or like, it's not about checking something off a list, but there's phases. And until you complete a phase, you're just literally not going to be available in perhaps the way that we are ready for you to be available. Which is, I think that's probably damaging, because we don't get it. Like, we're ready, so why aren't you? And then take that personally, but it doesn't have anything. We could not possibly be more amazing and have any impact on your readiness.
This is so funny that this is the one thing that you came up like that you brought up, because when Libby went through this was the one thing that stuck out for her too.
Yeah.
Like, it was a similar topic where she came to me one day. She's like, "Babe, I get it.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't want to get married. It's not because you don't love me. You're just not ready."
Not
and I was
ready.
Like, yes. Like, thank you, Allison Armstrong, for putting this into the world, because there was so much of this pressure in it.
Yeah.
It literally had nothing to do with Libby at the time. It was just like, there's stuff that I have to do first. And and it was so relieving for both of us to have that understanding in space. Yes.
Big one, right? And then there was something else that you had just said that even made me think of Allison Armstrong. The readiness thing was huge.
Making it a game to win.
Oh, yes. Set your man up to win.
Yes.
Make it easy. So here was the thing, and I'm going to be super honest. When she was talking about this, I was feeling a little resentment. I'm like, damn it. Like, to me, it kind of felt in a way that Allison Armstrong was being like, listen, women, this is just how men are, and you got to deal with it. And I'm like, but this is how I am. Don't they have to deal with it? And the fact of the matter is, you're just not going to. So I have a choice. I can make choices to get what I want while super honoring where you are, or I can be really fucking resentful about where you are and not getting what I want. My choice. So I am going to, even though it might be uncomfortable, even though it might not happen in the way I would have preferred, which is you read my mind. Yeah, you know what I want, and then you just give it to me whenever I want it. Which, it's funny, because when you say it, you're like, oh, that's very unreasonable. But women have that expectation and treat their men and their relationships like that all the time. I can simply go, okay, how do I set them up to win? How do I make this easy? And the easiest way is you just say, you communicate. And then perhaps sometimes that means you negotiate. And so here's a little segue into, I think, something we could also jam on is just the very real truth that no one person is equipped to give you everything you want. And I'm not necessarily talking about, although for some people this might be true, sex. I'm not saying you have to go sleep with a whole bunch of people, although for some people that might be an option on your menu that works for you. But even, my last partner was not a person who was inclined to talk about feelings and emotions. And that's something I need to do. So it was really, really, really hard for me to feel shut out. And so Mike is the exact opposite. Sometimes he wants to talk about feelings and I'm like, all right, can we just pause? But it's great because we get that exploration and then we can connect and we could do that. And so going outside of your primary partnership for certain energies that you need from the opposite sex. And again, whether that is sexual or whether it's emotional support or whether it's even just some kind of fun. There might be things that you enjoy doing that your partner doesn't. That doesn't mean that you never get to do those things. What's been your guys' experience with sourcing outside of just the two of you to get things that you need from the masculine or the feminine?
Yeah.
That you feel comfortable sharing, of course.
Totally. There's something, frankly, in the beginning, when we went through a whole codependence phase of just total codependence, and that just obviously didn't work, so we ended up breaking up. And then since coming back together, it's been much more a separateness, so to speak. And in the initial phases, I remember just an insecurity around it of what, you don't love me? Can I do everything for you? Feeling like I, as the man, should actually be able to provide all of that.
Yes.
I went through this phase with David Data where I read The Way of the Superior Man. I was like, oh my God, I love this book. This guy is a god. This is amazing. And then I took everything like a Bible And then I was like, if you're not fucking your women open with your presence in every moment, you're a failure. And then I went through a phase of like, I hate this stuff. Like, it's such bullshit. And then now I've kind of like come back around. I was like, like when I watched like some videos of his, I was like, he's incredible. Like when you actually hear him talk and not just read it as like this fucking thing. Anyway.
Mike went through that too. I remember like this one day of Mike being like, fuck you, David Data. Do I really have to be like penetrating everything all the time?
Totally. So it was like, so in that phase, it creates this like, I should be everything. Like otherwise I'm not a superior man.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
I wish you would change the title of that book. Side note. It's the worst.
Right?
But keep going. Yes.
But now where it is for us is it's actually relieving. It's actually relieving, and it's relieving to not have to be everything for that person, and it's actually relieving because I found that it creates a deeper sense of community with the people that we have friendships with. And so, there's a whole element of like intimacy isn't just sexual, right? There's emotional intimacy. There's like so many different layers of it. And one of the things that we just kind of hold are the people that we want to create a deeper sense of emotional intimacy with, is that they're people who we both like know and love and who we feel like support our partnership and our relationship. And that's been like a thing that we've held pretty strong too, where it's like, well, and then I think when that's in place, like there's a whole different level of freedom with it where it's relieving. Yeah.
And the word freedom, that's it. Right. And everyone's different. For some people, freedom might not be a huge value, but for Mike and I, freedom was a big thing we have in common. Like at no moment are either one of us interested or going to react well if we feel like we're shackled.
Yep. So
you mentioned Brian Franklin earlier, and Mike actually had interviewed Brian, and when he interviewed him, he gave me his computer immediately. It was like, watch this interview. And the thing you said was a big thing you took away from it, like using the female body as your barometer almost for how you're showing up or what's going on. Another thing he shared, though, was the purpose, the intention of relationship, whether it's growth, pleasure, or stability. And I think you and I know Mike and I bounce between growth and pleasure probably most often. And the idea of stability, even as entrepreneurs, right? Not really something we need tons of because we're pretty risk erotic. But there are some people who are super happy with stability and really, really desire that in a relationship based on like all these experiences that you've had. If someone does, how do you cultivate stability even when you're in this place of uncertainty, even when you're kind of exploring who am I right now? How do you bring stability to the relationship?
So I love that you're asking this. Brian Franklin is a wizard. Like he's taught me so much about relationship. Like I can't even begin to describe. He's so good. And one of the things that I don't totally agree with, I agree with to an extent with growth, pleasure, and stability. This whole functionality over form has really been an epiphany for me. And so the functionality of the relationship will be for a finite period of time. So we want to build a relationship that stands some sort of test of time, right? Like we've been talking about getting engaged, and a lot of the things that we talk about with that are like, is engagement for life or is it for a period of time, or what does that look like? And I feel like the only relationships that can last are the relationships that are constantly reinventing themselves.
Yes.
And so they're constantly in flux, right? So this idea, when I first heard the idea of growth, pleasure, or stability, I was like, man, we like growth a lot, but when we do that too much, we kind of get overwhelmed, and then it kind of sucks.
Burn each other out.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so it's not actually, you don't label your relationship as one of those three. Label it for a period of time.
Yes.
And so Libby and I just finished. I told you we do this thing every few months, and about a month and a half ago, we sat down and we figured out what is it that we actually want. And one of the things that we've never really been able to cultivate, because we've gravitated towards pleasure and growth as well, is we've actually struggled to create stability at some level. It's been pretty chaotic for 4 years. And so for the past 6 weeks, we've actually been focused on stability. So we made a decision not to go to Burning Man, and we went to LA and did some like brain testing and got like blood work done to see what we're allergic to, and started just spending more time together. And we got really clear on what each of us wants to create over this like time period together. And we've made a really conscious effort to prioritize things going slower and us being a little more grounded and saying no to a lot of the experiences that we would normally say yes to. And it's been really refreshing. And at the same time, I like find myself, all my friends are at Burning Man, I find myself like itching to like have another like growth pleasure experience that's out there, but it's going to be that much sweeter when we go back into it. And so it's like at some level a pendulum that has to keep swinging, and it feels really good to just go to one side for a while and then reset and then bring it back. And it keeps things just really fun and constantly changing and new. And neither of us, like you and Mike, want to get into like a stale, stagnant routine. That feels really not good.
That does feel like shackles. And I think that that's probably another to the demise of relationships in, our culture overall, is people being attached to things being the way they were, right? Like, so I see this with women in their bodies, and I can imagine it applies to couples in their relationship. A woman, for the most part, always wants to go back to the way she looked on the day she got married because she was in the best shape of her life, 95% of the time, right? But there was like this event, and there was this deadline that, there were going to be these pictures that were going to last forever. And so I used to, when I was a personal trainer, there was one year when I trained like 14 brides, and I'm like, I've never seen a more committed population of people than a woman who's going to wear a wedding dress and have pictures taken and walk down the aisle in front of everyone she loves. So, and then a woman who has a baby then wants her pre-baby body back. And I think the issue is wanting anything back that is just not humanly possible to get back. So I think it's probably similar in relationship, right? Honeymooning phase, you're just never going to get that back because you're never going to be a newlywed again or newly in a relationship. So what you said, when you use the word reinventing, that felt awesome because that's something I've noticed Mike and I doing too, right? Even closing out, okay, the cauldron phase, that's over. Like there's going to be phases, and balance does not equal equilibrium. There's going to be times when, whether it's emotionally, mentally, financially, that one partner might be carrying the weight. The other might have to step in. People might have to take on a role that they weren't planning on, right? Like I know for me, when we first moved in, there were a lot of things that were going on. And the thing that kept coming out of my mouth was, this is not what I signed up for. Well, what did you sign up for? And what are your expectations? And are you willing to pivot and sign up for what is? Or do you want to stay in the place of railing against not having what you thought you signed up for? And did the person agree to sign up for the same thing that you wanted? Right?
Totally.
And I also, when you use the word grounded, I think people, stability, again, gets very traditionally labeled, right? So what does stability mean? Consistency for a lot of people. And so you and I, and maybe some people can relate to this who are listening, maybe some people can't, our lifestyles are pretty inconsistent in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so for us, the stability might not be consistency, but groundedness. So can you say a bit more about what it feels like to feel grounded in your relationship?
Yeah. It's really sweet. Like, and especially we have May and April were really turbulent for us. We had like probably the most challenging 2 months we've had since breaking up. And so now we're in this like springtime phase, like cycles in nature, like how everything ties to that.
Yeah.
And we're in this like springtime phase. And so it's characterized by this groundedness. There's a consistent direction. Like we know where we're going, and it sounds kind of crazy because we're in this like state of uncertainty and chaos, at least for me. But we have this phase for 2 months where we know where we're going and what we're doing and what we're committed to. And how we did it is we decided for each of us what the things were that we were going to be committed to. For her, it was more health. For me, it was writing. Were like the elements that we both wanted. And then we both have a daily practice with it. And then if we do it, if we reach the goals that we set, we decided we're going to go on $1,000 shopping spree together. That's kind of the motivation factor.
Yeah.
And so it's like we've made it like this game. So it's like where we're both rooting each other on. We're both like in alignment with what we're trying to go towards. And then if we both get there, we have this like cool little celebration that we get to have at the end. And what I've noticed is like it's synced us in a really, really cool way. Like there isn't as much space for headbutting because we both know where we're going. When I was on a plane once and I was flying back to Denver and there was a big storm and we were running out of gas, so we had to land in Fort Collins for a little while. And we landed in Fort Collins and they basically said we might be here for a little while all the other planes have to land that are already in the air. And so they let some people off at Fort Collins. And so these people are getting up and I don't know, say 10 people on the plane are getting up and getting their stuff, and everybody's kind of like taking their time and being lackadaisical. And then the pilot comes on the mic. He's like, hey guys, we just got notice that we have a 15-minute window. And if we leave right now, we can make the window and land in Denver so we don't have to spend the next 2 hours sitting here on this runway. And when he said that, immediately everybody sat down, buckled up. The people who had their stuff, they were off the plane just like that. And it was because they had clear intention. They had like the clear direction and they knew what had to get done and everybody was in alignment with that. And when I noticed that when I bring that into relationship, it makes it a lot easier. Like it gives us a frame to like on a daily basis make decisions that we both know what we're moving towards. And I've experienced a lot of sweetness from it. Like stability is something that we haven't really had, and we wanted this because we wanted to know that we could create it if we wanted to. And
this is my opinion, might have been the most important thing of the entire conversation. There was a lot of great stuff, but that idea to come together and know what are you working towards individually, and then how can you support each other to get there together? Because when you don't, I love, and that story too, so great because, and this is something I work through with my women when they come for Untame Yourself intensive weekends, is to look at what are the most important areas of your life. Okay, what would be a 1 and what would be a 5? Like what's the ideal? And it's funny because what I am doing a little spoiler here, but I like to have people rank it before we actually identify what a 5 is, because I have them rank it without knowing what they really truly want there. And then when they know what they really truly want, I have them rank it again and see what's true. Because a lot of us kind of live under delusion because we're not.
Follow, can you say that again?
Yeah.
The 5 things I didn't follow.
So imagine I said to you, Andy, we'll just give you an example. If on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rank right now where you are with your writing? And if you didn't know what the 5 was, like if you didn't take any time to detail what a 5 actually is and you ranked it, that ranking would probably not be accurate. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Like where my mind just went, I was like, probably like somewhere like 3.5 to 4, something like that.
Cool.
And then when you started asking like, well, what would the 5 actually be? And I had a picture of what a 5 would be. I was like, actually, I'm at like a 2.
That's exactly
like,
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
That makes total sense.
And so what you were saying is the same exact thing in a relationship. I don't think people are probably having conversations like that. Like, where are we going as individuals? And then how do we support each other to get there together without having those beacons or that clear vision? It's just like then you're in that zone of like ambivalence or I think we're okay. I don't know, but it's definitely not as good as it could be. This is so great. So fun. So we're coming up on the hour mark, and that's usually when I try to call it, unless it's just like going. So like I feel like we could talk about this for friggin' ever. But let me ask you one more question to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I know that you have spent a lot of time actually around a lot of powerful and inspiring women, successful entrepreneurs and not, as well as, being in a relationship with a woman like Libby, women who are like actually very tuned in and connected to themselves.
Yeah.
What would you say 1 to 3 of the most consistent traits or behaviors you see in women who are like quite powerful, self-expressed, and connected to themselves that you've observed as a man?
Can you ask me the question one more time?
Yeah.
I kind of think through.
Yeah. So I know you've spent a lot of time and you've been around a lot of women who are like very powerful and like connected to that power and using it and expressing it into the world and also connected to themselves. 1 to 3, like 1, 2, or 3, what are some of the most consistent traits or behaviors that you observe in these women?
Yeah. Huh. There is a first thing that comes alive, a deep connection to intuition. And not just a connection to it, but a constant listening and trusting of it. Often that's been cultivated over time. That's the first one.
And 1 is good enough. If you're like, that's the one, it's fine.
That's one. Generally, there's been some sort of massive shift in their 20s to 30s where the most feminine women that I find that are in their power had some sort of intense experience, whether it's an eating disorder or sexual trauma or like some sort of like really intense experience that they spent a significant amount of their life numbing from. And they went through a process of healing that and moving through that. And that feels common from the women that I've experienced. And I think often what comes on the other side of it is that connection to intuition and is that connection to like the divine in a way that us men can only even begin to fathom. Like we actually have no idea. I think Brian's wife, Jennifer, or somebody described it to me as like almost like a DSL connection to spirit or source. Like it is just like constantly there every moment, like always. And for us, like as men, we have to sit down and meditate and create space and like go on walks in nature or whatever it is. But for women who are really connected, it's just tapped in at a whole different level. And that's why I think the partnership is so beautiful. But I think those two things are the two that come up for me that are most alive.
So good. And then, is there anything that you wished I would have asked you or something that to like tie a bow on everything we talked about that feels important to share before we sign off?
Yeah. One thing that feels really important to say before you sign off is that I think the way to be successful in relationship and also the way to be successful in life is to give up on the pursuit of happiness and start following what makes you come alive. And when you start looking at relationship through that lens of what makes you feel alive, you'll drop the whole notion of this isn't what I signed up for. I thought I was supposed to be happy, blah, 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 blah. And you can actually just relax into the burn and you can sit in it and stand in it. And as painful as it is, you can just be with the pain or be with the elation that comes from it too and not get attached to either. And that's the last thing.
Great. So great. I want to squeeze your face through the computer.
I'd give
Thank
you a big hug there.
So fun. Also, hug Libby for me, and I'm sure we'll see you guys sometime soon. But for everyone listening, this is Andy Drish, and is there even any way that you want people to connect with you outside of this right now, or no?
Sure. AndyDrish.com, Andy@thefoundation.com if you want to email me personally. All of that is good. And
so great. And we'll have links to a lot of the things we talked about, books, we talked about resources. We'll make sure we get links to all that stuff in the show notes. So you are fantastic. This was such a great, I feel very alive after this conversation. So thank you.
I do too. Thanks, Liz. So much fun.
You are welcome. Bye.
See ya.
I think over time, just developing self-awareness, and I probably didn't have that much of it when I was younger, till I was about late 20s, really. And then just being like asking myself the question, is this work for me? Like, do I feel good when this happens? Is this relationship serving me, or is it hurting, or is it holding me back? Is what I'm creating giving me more energy or creating stress and weight on my shoulders? So I just started asking myself the questions.